I personally, I've said this before, but in this case I truly do feel inadequate to speak about him, because Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, first of all, was the strictest of renunciates and celibate brahmacharis. Second of all, he spoke the loftiest and most elevated of philosophy, most of which I can't grasp, except for the fact that I already know that there is Krishna consciousness in the basic tenets. So we're going to make a humble effort at speaking about the life of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, and primarily go through a few of the different earlier portions of his life that maybe many devotees aren't familiar with. His relationship with ISKCON through Srila Prabhupada we're all very familiar with. Maybe some of the earlier parts of his life were not. So for those of you that are viewing in, we're going to give this a run. I see we've now got Bhakti Jeff from Boulder, and Bhakti Carol has informed us she's from Dallas. It's good to have you all there. Natasha, I see that you're new to our site, and someone's recommended you can go in here to ask some questions. If you have some questions you want to run back and forth with the people in the chat room about, feel free. Otherwise, at the top of the hour, at the end of our broadcast, we will take questions from those of you in the chat room and address those directly. Prior to that, we'll just do the presentation here. So, the concept of maintaining something is a very vast subject, and it's a very difficult subject. Anybody can create a business. Being able to maintain that business day to day, being able to take care of, seeing that it is ongoing, takes a lot of effort. This is why Lord Vishnu is responsible for maintenance. You have Vishnu, Shiva, and Brahma. Brahma, of course, creates everything. It's a very passionate nature to create things. Lord Shiva destroys everything. It's considered to be the mode of ignorance. Just go in and tear it all up. Who needs it? But Lord Vishnu has the responsibility to maintain everything, and this takes the most energy. Now, any of you out there that have been a temple president or a temple commander can directly relate to what I'm saying here. The very idea of having to maintain so much takes a lot of energy. And it takes a lot of foresight. And this foresight is the main thing that we find here with the pre-appearance of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, our great, great, great spiritual grandfather, if you will, he could see that the direction of Kali Yuga was going in such a manner that the standards of Vaishnava, well, what to speak of the onslaught of the material elements in Kali Yuga, the standards of Vaishnavism were beginning to fade away even in his time at the end of the 1800s. So, while making an effort to spread the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself and preaching as much as he was able to, he prayed for a ray of Vishnu to assist in establishing Krishna consciousness throughout the world. This was the words he used. He prayed to the Lord for a ray of Vishnu to help with the establishing of Krishna consciousness. February the 6th, 1874, in the city of Puri, the most holy city of Puri, in the family home, which at that time Bhaktivinoda Thakur was the temple magistrate for the Jagannath Puri temple, and they lived in a home right next to the temple. In the home at that place, at 3:30 in the afternoon, a son was born to Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhagavati Devi Dasi. This was the mother and father, and this was the fourth son of 10 children. This child, when he was born, had all of the amazing characteristics of what's called a Mahapurush, a great personality. Maha means great or wonderful, and Purusha means personal, form, personality. So a Mahapurush, a great personality, is described by 32 different bodily characteristics. These are given in various different shastras. We find them on Krishna's personage, as described in the Nectar Devotion. So this boy was seen like this, and very wonderful appearance. In addition, this child was the 11th descendant from Raj Krishnananda Dutt. Raj Krishnananda Dutt was the father of Narottam Das Thakur. So he's coming in a very exalted line. Now those who were present at the birth, they were very, very amazed, because they made note of the fact that the child's umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck like one would wear a Brahmin's thread. So these were all very, very wonderful things. So the astrologer was brought in, as astrologers are brought in at the birth of a child, noting the time and making the calculations and looking in all the books. And after reviewing all this, the astrologer said, he said, this child will be a brilliant preacher and will spread the teachings of the ultimate goal of life far and wide. So it's a very, very auspicious beginning to the life. Then, just a short time after that, was the Namakarana. Namakarana means the name-giving ceremony. This is one of the original sanskaras given. So this was the name-giving ceremony. And at the name-giving ceremony, the name-giving was Bimala Prasad Dutt. Dutt, of course, was the family name. Kedarnath Dutt. This was Bhaktivinoda Thakur's given name. So Dutt was the family name. Bimala Prasad. Bimala Prasad, this refers to one who is the potency of Lord Jagannath. Bimala Prasad, the internal potency. So this was the name of this child. 4th son of 10 children, 11th generation from Raj Krishnananda Dutt, the father of Narottam Das Thakur, coming in a very good line. Son of Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhagavati Devi Dasi, Bimala Prasad. So very nice. Now, the next ceremony that's generally observed is the Anna Prasad. But this is the middle of the summer. So it's Rath Yatra time. So the Rath Yatra cart is coming. And when the Rath Yatra cart moved in front of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's house, the cart stopped. And for 3 days, the cart would not move. This is a very common Leela with Lord Jagannath, that he'll stop this place or that place, or this devotee hasn't arrived. Rasikananda, that was like that. The cart was ready to go, but it wouldn't go. No, my devotee Rasikananda's not here. You can try, but I'm not going anywhere, Lord Jagannath told the king. So this Leela happens with Lord Jagannath. So at any rate, he stopped. Now, during these 3 days, Bhaktivinoda Thakur made arrangements for 24-hour kirtan all 3 days while the cart was stopped in front of his house. Now, Mother Bhagavati, of course, she's the wife of the temple manager. She took this opportunity to go up on the cart with the baby, 6-month-old baby, and place him before Lord Jagannath. And as she set him before Lord Jagannath, one of the large garlands from Lord Jagannath's form fell off and surrounded the child. All the persons on the cart that saw this, they all let out, Haribo! Haribo! This was seen as a great sign of Lord Jagannath's blessing. So as it was the 6 months, it was the time for the child's grain ceremony. So right there on Lord Jagannath's cart, in front of the deity of Jagannath, with the Mahaprasad of Lord Jagannath, Bimala Prasad's grain ceremony was performed. How wonderful, how auspicious, how spiritually potent. So, after the grain ceremony, of course, the inclination of one's tendency is there to take the coin or take some dirt for being a Vaishnava, a farmer or whatever, or pen and paper, if like that, or the Bhagavatam. So when these options were given to the child Bimala Prasad, he reached and took the Bhagavatam and embraced it to his chest. So this was understood as a great sign that this child would be very, very devoted to the teachings of the Lord. At this time, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who was watching the entire event, thought in his mind, now I see I have my ray of Vishnu to assist in the preaching. So this was the destiny of this Bimala Prasad. When Bimala Prasad was a young boy, his father was bringing home the boga into the home. You know how it is. You go out shopping, you come back in the end of the day, or at some point you're bringing the groceries in. So he brought them in and set them down, and the young boy, Bimala, was maybe 4 or 5 years old. He went over to the bag and he opened, and there was a mango. Very, very nice mango. Mango season is very nice in Jagannath Puri. So he picked it up. He said, "This one is mine." And Kedarnath, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, rather sternly but lovingly as a father, said, "What is this? Boga is brought into the home, and before it is offered to the Lord, you're thinking that you will enjoy it? How is this possible?" So Bimala Prasad took it very serious. What was his exact words? He said, "Oh, what evil thoughts! The proper punishment for one ruled by such greed is to not eat this." So he took a vow then at the age of 4 or 5 to never eat mango again. And he did this. Prabhupada tells the story many, many times. He did this. Whenever anyone would bring and offer mango to him, he would put his hand up and say, "No, I'm a offender, I cannot eat. So from such a young age like this, very, very strict. Now, what is the, as Prabhupada says, what is the harm as a young child? But very strict he was. He took this vow. So, 7 years old, Bimala Prasad memorized the entire Bhagavad Gita. Now, I'm curious how many of you out there in our viewing audience and how many of you in our chat room have memorized the entire Bhagavad Gita. This is very interesting. At 7 years old. Now, of course, many students, they can memorize. We see, sometimes we do these plays with our children in the Gurukulas and the preschool and like that, and they get up in front of the audience and they give some recitation of some verses. And then you say to them, oh, very nice, what does that mean? I don't know. It's just something we were told to say. So like that. But this was not the case with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura. Bimala Prasad at this point, Bimala Prasad memorized the entire Gita by the age of 7 and could eloquently speak on each verse and give an explanation of what its meaning was. At the age of 7 years old. Very, very amazing. Now during this time, Bhaktivinoda was arranging for a home to be built. It was called the Bhakti Bhavan. Bhakti Bhavan was the name of the house he was having built. And when the foundation was being dug up, they came across a Kurma deity. I seem to remember from someplace that it was a Kurma Shila, Shalagram Shila, or it may have just been a deity of Kurma. That I can't remember. Kurma, for those of you not familiar, Kurma is the incarnation of the Lord as a tortoise for holding up the universe like that. So, at any rate, this deity was found by Bhaktivinoda, and he brought his son, Bimala Prasad, over, who was 7 years old, entrusted the deity to him with the proper mantras for worshipping, and Bimala Prasad began to faithfully and daily worship that deity of Kurma all throughout his youth. That deity was worshipped with great regulation and great devotion. During this time also, he would listen very attentively to the lectures of his father. And it mentions that his father thought, oh, my son listens with rapt attention. This is a very good sign. This must be where Bhaktivinoda Thakur had the opportunity, because you remember when he observed Prabhupada listening and they asked about initiating Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta said, yes, he listens attentively. So he had training from his youth to know what is proper attentive listening like that. So in this way, he would listen at the age of 7 to the lectures of his father. When he was 11 years old, now this is very interesting. When he was 11 years old, he invented a type of shorthand. He invented this himself. It's called Bikanta. And in some places this is still used in Bengal. And this is a type of shorthand that he invented. And it was just, like I say, his own creation. Like very, very interesting. And the teachers, they were all very, very amazed at his extraordinary intelligence, at his memory, at the high quality of his moral character, and the level of devotion that he had in his activities. It was amazing to all of the teachers. Particularly, it was noted how he excelled in both math and in astrology. And at this point, his tutors named him Siddhanta Saraswati. Very knowledgeable individual, very expert in understanding the meaning of Vedanta. So Siddhanta Saraswati was the name he was given. Now, the interesting thing, it mentions that when he was in school, he never studied. Now, I know of other people, myself in that small circle, that when they were in school never studied. The difference, of course, is that when Siddhanta Saraswati never studied, still he would go to the class and he would turn in all the reports on time, answer all the questions with a full understanding. He had a picture-perfect memory. Hearing something once or seeing it once, and he always remembered it. So in this way, he was able to very, very clearly know the subject and always get excellent grades and get everything correct, but never had to pay any attention to studying. Instead, what he would do was he would read all the books that were there available to him, particularly those by Narottam Das Thakur and those written by his father, Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So, didn't bother for the regular school subjects, but spent his time studying the books of Narottam and songs of Narottam and the writings of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And he sharpened his intelligence. At this point it mentions that he sharpened his intelligence by debating with everyone he met. Absolutely every person he met. And he was never defeated. He always won every argument that he started. There was one, just like the story in Chaitanya Charitamrita of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Keshava Kashmiri, actually was Nimai Pandit at the time, young student, and Keshava Kashmiri and the description of the Ganga and like that. There was one Pandit, his name was Panchana Sahitcharya, and he came through Bengal and was very well known also at that time for his logician and his rhetoric and Naya and all these different things. And so he sat down and Bhaktisiddhanta Bimala Prasad debated with him. And when he debated with him, the man was thoroughly defeated and embarrassed beyond all public recognition. So in this way, he was very, very happy at this, very, very well versed in this different process of debating and sharpened intellect and picture-perfect memory. Excuse me there. So, when Siddhanta Saraswati was 13, Bhaktivinoda brought back from Puri. Bhaktivinoda had been in Puri. By this point, I should mention, they had moved to Navadvip. The family had picked up from Puri. In the biographies of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, you'll find that he traveled a lot as a family man between Puri, Navadvip, and different other places in Bengal. But at this point, the family had left Puri and was residing in Navadvip area. And Bhaktivinoda had gone to Puri for some particular business and returned. And when he returned, Siddhanta Saraswati was 13 years old. He brought with him Tulsi beads from Puri, and he initiated Siddhanta Saraswati into the Harinam. He gave him the holy name of the Lord, and he gave him the Nrsimha mantra. And so, in addition to his worshipping of his Kurma deity, his chanting on his beads, and his recitation of the Nrsimha mantra, these were his daily practices. And it was during this time that Bhaktivinoda set up his printing press in the Mayapur area, in Navadvip. And Bimala, Siddhanta Saraswati, became very well versed in all the workings of the printing press. How things were done, how it was edited, how it was printed, the distribution, everything like that. It was very, very nice. So, at this same time, he went with his father and toured the holy places of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Bengal. And it was very, very nice. You can imagine, if you think about it, the opportunity, the father, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, being able to take his young son of, 13, 14 years old, to all the different places of Mahaprabhu's pastimes. Keeping in mind that it was Bhaktivinoda himself that uncovered many of these pastimes. Bhaktivinoda studied and figured out where the Yogapeeth, the birth site of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, was, as well as many other places associated with the Lord's Navadvip pastimes. So for him to take his son around, I can speak from this in experience, because I just had the opportunity when I was in India to have my son there with me, and to be able to take my son around and introduce to him different places in Vrindavan, different places in Rishikesh, and show him where this was and that was. And so it's a very, very wonderful feeling to be able to pass that information on to your child. And particularly, he was passing this on to his son, who he had prayed for and saw as a ray of Vishnu. So wonderful, wonderful experience. It was like that. So when Siddhanta Saraswati was 16 years old, he collected a group of friends and formed a society. And the English translation was the August Assembly. And what this group of friends did, they studied different devotional writings. They analyzed different types of philosophical schools of thought. And one particular item was that all the members of this assembly had to practice celibacy. And it mentions that Siddhanta Saraswati was the only one that took these vows very seriously. As we'll see, he took them very serious all throughout his entire life. During this time, at the age of 16, remember, he wrote 2 books on astrology that were widely appreciated because, as we mentioned earlier, he'd become very expert in the science of art, science of math, and of astrology. So, 16, he continues a bit of his schooling. At the age of 18, he's admitted to the Calcutta Sanskrit College. in the Calcutta Sanskrit College, the same thing. He didn't spend very much time studying, didn't spend very much time reviewing any of the lessons, but the library in the school, you can imagine it's a Sanskrit college, it's in Calcutta, the seat of the Bengali movement, and they had so many different religious and philosophical books, and Siddhanta Saraswati spent all of his time reading these books. Very, very happy to read these books. He was being encouraged, he's 18, he's there for 3 years, 21 years. He was being encouraged at this time by all of the teachers and scholars and administrators of the college that he should, very seriously pursue academic education and the different pursuits available to him. And he said to them, this is a quote he said, "My life is for the single-minded cultivation of the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu." This was his thought, his direction. And then after being encouraged like this by the teachers, he thought within his mind, if I keep studying, great pressure will be put upon me to enter into family life, because I'll be seen as a responsible, intelligent individual, and therefore the pressure will be given to me to take up family life. He said, however, if I appear to be stupid and incompetent, no one will bother me in this way. So with this thought in mind, he dropped out of college. So this was his thought that, if I pursue this academic thing, if I continue on like this, then, boom, they're going to pressure me into household life. But if I appear to be incompetent and not worthy of this, then they'll drop me out like that. So he dropped out of college. Now, during this time, he returned to Navadvip and, stayed at home with his father and studied. He was 23 years old, and he was encouraged by Jagannath Das Babaji. Those of you that are familiar with this time in history, Jagannath Das Babaji was one of the senior associates of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and one of the great devotees of the Navadvip area. And he encouraged Siddhanta Saraswati to rewrite the calendar at that time to what is now called the Navadvip Panchaka. And the Navadvip Panchaka, is, they've taken all the different names of the month and all the different astrological, and everything is done with the names of Krishna. And this is what the basis is for the current Vaishnava calendar that we now use every day to calculate things such as Bhaktisiddhanta's disappearance date, or when is Ekadasi, all of these different things. These are all done on this Navadvip Panchaka. And so this was written by Bhaktisiddhanta at the age of 23. Now during this same period, between the age of 21 and 23, he was engaged in the service of the king of Tripura. He had 3 particular things that he executed while he was in that service. The first thing that he did, and this seems to be a habit that we see throughout his life, was he availed himself to the royal library. Now, of course, at that time, kings had wonderful, wonderful libraries at their disposal. And so he availed himself to this library and learned many, many different things. In addition, he was asked by the king to tutor the king's sons in both Sanskrit and Bengali. And the third thing, which was very important, he was asked by the king, there was some activity of embezzlement going on in the royal treasury. And so he was requested by the king to please look into this and resolve it and correct it. And Siddhanta Saraswati at the time was able to do this, to investigate it, to correct it. But in doing this, a very important realization, he realized that the nature of being involved in government meant that there was this type of, cheating and, type of dishonesty, crookedness that was constantly there in the activities of government. And so for this reason, he resigned from the service of the king and never involved himself in any type of government affairs again. It mentions also that when he resigned, he was given a full pension by the king of Tripura all the way until he was 34 years old. And this allowed him to continue with some of the other studies and pursuits that he followed after that. So when he was 23 years old was also when he began his first Chaturmasya. Now, some of you may be familiar from previous discussions on the Acharyas about this Chaturmasya. This is the 4 months of the rainy season in the late summer and early spring, when the sages stay in one place instead of travel and perform serious penance and austerity. Very, very strict vows about what they eat, what they don't eat, how they sleep, the amount of reading and chanting, and all of these different things. It's very strictly governed with a goal towards reducing the bodily activities, increasing the performance of penance and austerity, and elevating the consciousness by enhanced remembrance of Sri Krishna. So this was at the time that he was doing that, and he very, very strictly followed all these rules. Now, during this time, Bhaktivinoda Thakur built a house in Godruma Dweep. This is one of the 9 islands in the Navadweep Mayapur district. The different places in that area of Bengal where Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes took place. And now this was just after he, with the confirmation of Jagannath Das Babaji, confirmed the birthplace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is those of you that may know the story. Jagannath Das Babaji at the time was 104 or 134, I don't remember which, but either way, he was very, very elderly, to the point that he was invalid and was carried about in a basket, old version of a wheelchair, if you will. And when Bhaktivinoda Thakur ascertained what he believed to be the proper place of the birth of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he had Jagannath Das Babaji come. And when Jagannath Das Babaji came and visited this place, he literally, although was invalid, jumped out of the basket and began to dance. Now, I've heard some different figures about how high he jumped. They're quite amazing figures. Very, very high, jumping in ecstasy, dancing, even though in an invalid state of existence at this place. So, having built this place, the reputation of this discovery began to filter throughout the Vaishnava world. And it filtered to Vrindavan, and there was one sadhu living in Vrindavan whose name was Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. And Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, even at this point in his life, before returning to Navadweep, was known for his strict renunciation and his strict performance of austerities and his high level of devotion to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, hearing about the discovery of this, he was invited and, in a mood of humility, accepted and returned, which is the area he was originally from. He was previously a grain merchant before going to Vrindavan. He returned to the Navadweep area to take up the association of Bhaktivinoda and Jagannath Das Babaji. So this was the age of 26 when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati met Gaur Kishore Das Babaji for the first time. Very, very interesting, because Gaur Kishore Das Babaji had very few personal belongings. He had a basket which had some items in it for the performance of daily worship. He had a tiger skin cap, and both the basket and the tiger skin cap had been given to him by his guru, Bhagavat Das Babaji. He also had a few pieces of rope that had knots in them for chanting japa. And he had a tilak stamp with the words Hare Krishna in Bengali script. He also carried 2 books with him. One was Narottam Das Thakur's Prem Bhakti Chandrika, and the other was Narottam Das Thakur's Pratana. So these 2 books he carried, and of course we know from the pastimes of Narottam Das Thakur earlier in our series here, that these 2 books are considered by Gaur Kishore Das Babaji the best available means of developing love for God. As a matter of fact, he was asked once, how do you get love for God? And he said to the questioner, he said, do you have 5 rupees? That's 5 rupees. Of course, whatever the denomination of coin was, but do you have 5? And of course, he said, then you go to the market and you buy Prem Bhakti Chandrika and Pratana. These 2 books will give you love for God. So this was the value that Gaur Kishore Das Babaji placed on these. So when he arrived there, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati met him And he immediately, Gorkashore Das Babaji, immediately gave the tiger skin cap and the basket with the items for worship to Bhaktisiddhanta. He also gave him the rope that was knotted for chanting Hare Krishna on. So these were things that he received immediately from his spiritual master. And so some time went on, and he was residing there with Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And in due course, Bhaktivinoda Thakur instructed Siddhanta Saraswati, it is time for you to take Diksha. You should accept initiation from Gorkashore Das Babaji. Matter of fact, Bhaktivinoda Thakur's words were a bit stronger than that. He told him, he said, if you don't get initiation by him, don't come home. So, very strong instruction from his father. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati at the time approached Gorkashore, and in a very humble means, because Gorkashore Das Babaji did not accept any blessings or any big worship or anything. He lived very, very simply. So he approached him and he requested, my dear Lord, he said, I beg that you please give me initiation. The time has come in my life to accept instruction on the spiritual matters of this world and to be guided by a suitable personality. So I'm begging that you please accept me as your disciple. He said, oh, I cannot do that. I do not take disciples. No, I beg you, please. He said, all right then, next time I see Mahaprabhu, I will ask him. So this was his answer. Now you can be gone now. So Siddhanta Saraswati left. And next day he came back. So Siddhanta Saraswati said, did you see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and ask him? He said, yes, I saw him, but I forgot to ask. Gorkashore was teasing with him like this. He said, I will ask him next time. So Siddhanta Saraswati returned a second time. He said, I saw him, but he did not give an answer. So in this way, this went on. The third time, Siddhanta Saraswati approached him. And he was given the same type of, oh, I did not get any instruction. He did not answer. I have not seen him like that. So Siddhanta Saraswati broke down crying, literally tears running down his face. He said, what can I expect? You were the worshipper, along with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of that crooked person, Sri Krishna, who is cheating the hearts of the gopis. So how can I expect that you will treat me any differently? He said, if you do not initiate me, I will go and throw myself into the Ganga off the bridge and commit suicide. So Gorkashore could see that this boy is actually very serious. So he told him, he said, all right, go to the Ganga, take your bath, and come back. So when he took his bath and returned, then he gave him his initiation. And at the time of his initiation, he gave him the name Sri Barshabhanavi Devi Dayeta Das. Very long name. And this is the name that we formally know Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura by. When we say his pranams, this is the name that is used, one of the names that is used for him. And so at this time, he began to associate very much with Gorkashore and take direct instruction from him. Now it's important to point out here that this was the only disciple that Gorkashore Das ever accepted, because this will serve well at two later stories in the life of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Never accepted any other disciple. Now, when we look at this pastime of Bhaktisiddhanta and Gorkashore Das Babaji, we can't help but be reminded of the story of Narottam Das Thakur and Lokanath Maharaj. Lokanath Maharaj, of course, would not initiate, and Narottam would not give up, and in this way they went back and forth, and then eventually Narottam, by dint of his devotion, was able to convince Lokanath, just as by dint of his devotion Bhaktisiddhanta was able to convince Gorkashore. So this is the proper method between the guru and disciple, a little bit of testing back and forth to see that there's actually serious like that. So during this time after receiving initiation, Siddhanta Saraswati, Bhaktisiddhanta as he is known now, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he began to travel a bit to different places, and particularly he went to Puri. When he went to Puri, he started to really develop an appreciation for this holy city of Lord Jagannath, and this place of pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And it wasn't that he went like a tourist in the mood of just, visiting different places, but he began to actually understand the deep inner mood connected with the pastime places of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Puri like this. While he was there, of course his father was there with him, and Bhaktisiddhanta would regularly speak on the Chaitanya Charitamrita while he was visiting these different places in Puri like this. And it would be in the presence of his father that he would speak like this. And his father was very, very proud. You can just imagine how spiritually proud Bhaktivinoda Thakur was to sit and watch his son, such a vibrant, enthusiastic preacher like this. So at this time, the father and son together, they traveled to Kashi, to Gaya, to Prayag. These are three prominent places in the life of Mahaprabhu. And the experiences and the education and the information that Bhaktisiddhanta gathered in these places, he used in writing his commentary on Chaitanya Charitamrita. So it served him very well in this way. So, upon returning from Puri, Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, returning to Puri, there was, after this trip to Prayag and Kashi and Gaya, thank you, Gaya, they returned to Puri, and what had happened was that there was one individual, he was a friend of theirs, his name was Radhacharan Das Babaji, and he had been listening to the different lectures Bhaktisiddhanta was giving in Chaitanya Charitamrita. He was an associate of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's, and there was a big falling out that took place between Bhaktivinoda, Bhaktisiddhanta, and Radharaman Charan Das Babaji. And it was over basically 2 points, 2 philosophical points. One was the mantra that Radharaman Charan Das Babaji was propagating, and propagating like wildfire, and getting masses and thousands of people to chant this mantra. Bhaja Nitai Gaur Radhe Sham, Japa Hare Krishna Hare Ram. This was his mantra. Bhaja Nitai Gaur Radhe Sham, Japa Hare Krishna Hare Ram. Is that right? Yeah. So, Bhaktisiddhanta and Bhaktivinoda Thakur, of course, could see the shortcoming in this mantra. It was filled with opposing philosophical presentations, and it had rasabhasa, different moods prominent in it. It was not an appropriate mantra. It was what's called a bogus mantra, a concocted mantra. But it has a very rhymey kind of Bhajanita Gaur Radhe Sham Japa Hare Krishna Hare Ram, like that, So, and it became very, very enchanting, and it was a very rhymey kind of bhajan that they would do. And he would get thousands of people chanting this. So they tried to encourage him. And the second point was this Shaki Vesh. Radharaman Charan Das Babaji was of the belief that certain of his disciples should be trained to dress as gopis in gopi clothing and perform their gopi bhava, their gopi mood, their activities as a cowherd girl. And this is, of course, completely against the doctrine of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There are delineated by Bhaktivinoda, Bhaktisiddhanta, and some of our own current ISKCON writers, different prominent deviant sampradayas that came after Mahaprabhu. And this Shaki Vesh style is one of these. This concocted idea of dressing like a gopi to be part of Radha and Krishna's pastimes like this. So they encouraged him. They spoke strongly against him, but he wouldn't listen. And so this split up their relationship. And Bhaktisiddhanta, throughout Puri, continued strongly preaching against these points when he would talk. So at any rate, during this time, this is like 1904, 1905, Bhaktisiddhanta does a tour of South India. And particularly he goes to Sri Rangam. And particularly in Sri Rangam, he begins to develop an understanding from the Ramanuja Sampradaya about their method of awarding the order of sannyas. Because what's happening is in the Bengal area, sannyas has been rejected. And instead everyone takes Babaji. Babaji means take a little short cloth, renounce everything, go around and beg like that. So Bhaktisiddhanta was looking for some adjustment, some different information. So this he gathered from the Ramanujas. When he returned to Puri, he began preaching very strongly again about these two differences, because all of Puri was in an uproar over this now. Now there's a little side note here about the preaching style of Bhaktisiddhanta. He was called the Lion Guru, Simha Guru. This was a common name for him because he was a very strong preacher in his early days. It was known that sometimes if he would be out on an early walk in the mornings or with a few followers, if he came across a Mayavadi, follower, he would grab that Mayavadi by his shirt, this sannyasi, and shake him, and chastise him, and physically, why are you following these nonsense teachings? Why are you denying that? Chastise him very strongly like this. So in this way, whenever he would be out and the Mayavadis would see him on the road, they would run the other direction. And there's a funny story in this regard. That big impersonalist Vedanta Society in Calcutta, they invited Bhaktisiddhanta to speak one time for a debate, but they gave him a condition. The condition is you can speak, but you can't refer to the Srimad Bhagavatam. So he said, okay, no problem. So he came, and he defeated them soundly. So they invited him a second time. They said, okay, this time you can't refer to the Bhagavatam, but you also can't refer to the Mahabharata, to the Ramayana, or to any of the Puranas. Because obviously he had used the Mahabharata and Ramayana and the Puranas to support his point previously. So he said, okay. So completely defeated them. So they invited him a third time. And they said, okay, now not only can't you use the Bhagavatam, Mahabharata, the Puranas, and the Ramayana, but you can't use any of the Vedas, the Upanishads, or the Smritis. You can only speak from the Vedanta Sutras. Because, of course, this is the Mayavadi's home turf. The Vedanta Sutras, they figure they can wrangle these to come up with their meaning. So he agreed. And he soundly defeated them again based on this. So after that, they invited him not ever to come back. So anyway, back in Puri, Bhaktisiddhanta is 26, 27 years old. And at this time, he writes a Vaishnava encyclopedia, 4-volume encyclopedia, on all of the history of the different Vaishnava teachings and the different lines of Vaishnava philosophy. The scholars and the pundits at that time, looking at this book, said if 25 to 30 men with full access to the entire treasury of the king sat down and made an effort, they could not edit this work in their lifetime. So he published this. Now, as I mentioned, in the same time, he's preaching very strongly about these points from Radharaman Charandas Babaji. So much so that his father, Bhaktivinoda, encourages that maybe it's best you go to Navadvip, because all of Puri is in an uproar. It's actually dividing the entire Puri community over this point. Those that feel in support of Bhaktisiddhanta and Bhaktivinoda, and those that feel in support of Radharaman Charandas Babaji, and is causing a lot of friction. So Bhaktivinoda encourages that he should return to Navadvip and just kind of step out of the fracas, so to speak. So when he returns to Navadvip, Bhaktivinoda begins to think, all right, I don't have any preaching to do here. What will I do? So in the mood of Haridas Thakur, he takes a vow to chant 300,000 names a day. Now, for those of you on the chat room, and for those of you listening in our web audience, 300,000 names a day comes out to about 100, not about, but comes out to 192 rounds a day. Now, as initiated disciples, we chant 16 rounds a day. Many devotees on Ekadasi chant 25 rounds a day. And some devotees on special appearance days like Gaur Purnima or Janmashtami chant 64 rounds a day. 192 rounds a day. This means that one's entire life is focused, entire day, entire time frame is focused on chanting. So, in this way he began to chant. Now, Bhaktisiddhanta calculated, if I chant 300,000 names a day, if I spend 9 years doing this, then I'll be able to chant 1 billion names of the Lord. Now, for those of you who may be listening from other parts of the world, this may or may not seem as relevant, but here in America right now, there's a big concern over the economy and the financial stability of many different branches of this country. And particularly in today's news, just over the weekend, they caught some man who was embezzling and scamming very wealthy clients. Anyway, to the tune of something like $5 billion. And that's billion with a B, not with an M. Now, we know that there's vast amounts of money, but billion. So it's a very big amount. So this was Bhaktisiddhanta's thinking. If I practice like this, 192 rounds a day, in the course of 9 years, I will have chanted 1 billion names of the Lord. So this was his thought. Bhakti Jeff's real quickly asking, when chanting 300,000 names, does that mean the mantras or the Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, each individually? It means the mantra, Bhakti Jeff. So the full Hare Krishna mantra. So this comes out to the 192 rounds. So, at any rate, and he chanted this living in a very simple condition. He lived in a small grass hut next to the Yoga Pit, or the birth site of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he ate very simple chaturmasya type food, just food soaked in water, and he ate very simply from the floor in a very austere condition. He slept on the floor, and during the rainy season, when the roof of his grass hut began to leak, instead of make arrangements to repair it, he simply put an umbrella up inside the hut. So he's inside of his house and the roof leaks, he puts an umbrella up. So in this way, he began to chant. When his spiritual master, Gorkashore Das Babaji, heard about the level of renunciation and observed it for himself, he said, I see in my Prabhu the kind of renunciation of Rupa and Raghunath. This was how Gorkashore Das Babaji referred to Siddhanta Saraswati, my Prabhu. He was his disciple, but he referred to him as my Prabhu. This was his way of speaking about him. So during this time, Bhaktisiddhanta began to, as a result of these austerities, develop a very strong point on this preaching about the difference between being born in a Brahmin family and actually having the qualification of being a Brahmana. This is the same point that Narottam Das Thakur preached on and faced, the same point that Nityananda and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu preached on and pushed. And they all met with the same type of resistance. There was a great concern about the doors this would open against the what's called the Smarta community, or those that are born in a Brahmin family but may not be behaving in that manner. Srila Prabhupada gives the classic example that just because one has a father who was a Supreme Court Justice, it doesn't mean that he will automatically, because he was born into the family of a Supreme Court Justice, it doesn't mean that he will automatically be a Supreme Court Justice. He may be on the other side of the bench and be the criminal being tried in the court. So this is the same type of foolish logic used by these persons who are adverse to this, that because you were born in a Brahmin family, regardless of your activity, you're a Brahmin. And if you're not born in a Brahmin family, no matter what you do, you can't elevate yourself. Well, as I mentioned, from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu forward to our own Srila Prabhupada, this has been proven completely erroneous. That the qualification is what determines one's consciousness, not the physical birth of one's body. So in this way, he was preaching very strongly on this point. Now, at this time in his life, he wrote a wonderful essay, which I brought along a copy of this. I want to take a moment and read a selection of what he has here. The essay is a warning about being a guru. Here we go. This is at a point in which he's beginning, in 1906, at which he's beginning to be approached to accept disciples. Siddhanta Saraswati had never given initiation to anyone. His character was such that he never regarded disciples as his disciples, but would see them as being that which he received from the lotus feet of his spiritual master. He would address them as Prabhu. In his address to the Gaudiya Math's first Vyas Puja, he addressed his disciples as my friends, rescuers from danger. He also wrote, and this is the point that I wanted to stress here, what he writes here, if a Vaishnava does not do the work of a guru, then the spiritual Vaishnava lineage will stop. Again, if he does the work of a guru, then he becomes a non-Vaishnava. For if a guru thinks I am guru, then the first U in the word disappears and is replaced by A and becomes Gauru, which means cow. A real guru does not make disciples, and thus that is how he remains as a guru. So Bhaktisiddhanta is giving a very strong warning here about the importance of accepting disciples, but at the same time the importance of realizing these are not my possession, these are not my property, that I am simply here to serve them. So this is the same mood that must be accepted by anyone in a position of leadership, a father, a husband, a temple president, any position of leadership within the society of Vaishnavas. One has to be very careful in this regards. So I mentioned he was being approached, and in particular he was being approached by a devotee. His name was Rohini Kumar Ghosh. Now Rohini Kumar Ghosh came from a well-to-do family. He was a very nice young man, very nice young man. But somehow or another he had been led astray by bad association with the Bauls. Now for those of you that don't know what the Bauls are, it's one of these deviant sampradayas I mentioned. They have created a bogus philosophy and bogus teachings, and they are very expert at distracting people on the true path of devotional service to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, what we have is, in this particular group of Bauls, there was a husband and wife, and they're supposed to be renunciates. They're sannyasis, but they were husband and wife. So they addressed Rohini Kumar Ghosh that he should address them as mother and father. So at any rate, one day, Rohini Kumar Ghosh happened to be in an assembly of devotees that were listening to the teachings of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And upon listening and hearing the teachings of Siddhanta Saraswati, he was very, very moved. And he thought, this is really what I'm looking for. So he returned to his home that night, and he took his rest, and he had a dream. And in his dream, that couple, the Baul couple, husband and wife, took the form of a tiger and a tigress and began chasing him and cornered him and were going to attack him and eat and devour him. And at that point in his dream, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati appeared on the scene and chased them away. So when Rohini woke the next morning, he realized, oh, I know what I have to do now. So he went to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and asked for initiation, surrendered to him. And he gave him that initiation. There's an important point, two important points here. One was that when Gorkashore Das Babaji saw that, first of all, he was accepting disciples, and that second of all, the proper mood with which he was doing it, he became very pleased. And Gorkashore Das Babaji never allowed anyone to touch his feet. But appreciating the mood of Bhaktisiddhanta, he called him and he placed his feet on his head. We see many of the biographies we've discussed include the circumstance of Lord Nityananda placing his feet, or Lord Chaitanya placing his feet on the head of the devotee. So in this way, Gorkashore Das Babaji blessed him. Continue preaching and keep everything else to the side. Continue preaching and keep everything else to the side. Now the second point that I think is important to mention about this is that there is an idea that when one's guru is still present, one cannot initiate disciples. We see right here this was going on, and if we study our Vaishnava history, we find that this was also going on during the time of Narottam Das Thakur, during many of the different acharyas. The condition is that the spiritual master must give his blessings that this can be done. And we have even seen in our own ISKCON society that certain individuals have been allowed this opportunity for being able to initiate disciples. And it's according to time and place and location like that. So at the age of 37, we're starting to really run late here, and we have quite a bit more to cover. We're going to continue. At the age of 37, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati established the supremacy of the Gora mantra. There were a number of people challenging the existence of Sri Chaitanya, the acceptance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as the personality of Godhead. And they were basing it on the fact that nowhere in the Shastra, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, or in these places is it noted. So with great detail, of course this is aside from the fact that in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Brahma himself indicates that in the future this personality will appear on the banks of the Ganga in the Navadvip district, and personality of Godhead in a golden form will preach the glorification of the name of Sri Krishna like this. So with great effort, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati researched all the different Puranas, all the different Vedas, all the different Upanishads, and collected amazing volume of proof and supporting Shastric evidence to the supremacy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then he presented this in a lecture before all the pundits that were questioning this. Unknown to him, sitting in the back of the lecture hall very quietly listening, was Gorkashore Das Babaji. And when the presentation was finished, it was completely accepted, the point he was making. As I mentioned earlier, he was a very good debater and he was never defeated. So in this way he established without question. The entire story is much more, much fuller than that, but we're kind of adapting a bit and cutting back so we can try and make it all the way through. Vaishnava Saints Rock. I like this.
Testimonial.
Jai Bhakta Brian. Yeah, get a t-shirt like that, you know. That'll be my bumper sticker, Brian Prabhu. Vaishnava Saints Rock. At any rate, sorry, I got distracted here. So, now there's a very interesting story at this point in Bhaktisiddhanta's life. He was invited by the pundits, the court administrators of this king, to come for a presentation of religious theologies and philosophical points like this. So he went, but the pundits were very much in disagreement with Bhaktisiddhanta and didn't really like that he was invited, but the king had invited him. So they didn't let him speak. They gave him one very short little time to speak, and when he was speaking, they shouted him down. So now during the course of this convention, if you will, Bhaktisiddhanta was given a place to stay in the palace, and the king was sending prasad to him every day on a golden plate. Bhaktisiddhanta would not eat one bite. He would take the tulsi leaf off the plate and eat that, and that was it. So he fasted the entire time he was there. And so then the last day he got this opportunity to speak, and then he was shouted down. And with that he decided enough of this, and he left. And he went to the train station. He was going to catch a train back to Mayapur. So the king came to find out that Bhaktisiddhanta not only was not eating any of the food that the king was sending to him, but they were telling the king, the reason he won't eat it, he says, you're from a lower caste and he won't eat anything produced by you. So the king thought, this isn't right, and plus he's left. So the king himself went to the train station to meet Bhaktisiddhanta before he left. And he inquired from him sincerely, why have you rejected all of my offerings? And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said, why should I accept an offering from you? I've done no service. I have not been allowed to speak, therefore I have not rendered any service, therefore why should I accept an offering from you? He said, but, opportunity. He said, no. He said, your pandits, your learned scholars, they prevented me from speaking. And then Bhaktisiddhanta delivered the final blow. He said, and besides that, your pujari is a aparadi. And he does not properly understand the distinction of a Vaishnava and the deity form of the Lord. So whatever he is offering is not accepted by the Lord as prasadam anyway. So for this reason, I did not eat. And the king offered his apologies and felt very badly, and Bhaktisiddhanta returned to his home like this. And very interesting story like that. So at the age of 38, Bhaktisiddhanta gathered a few followers. He had a handful of disciples now and other followers, and he did a parikrama of the different Bengali places of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And as I was thinking about this, I was reminded of what we were reading references to in some of the other pastimes in the Bhakti Ratnakar, how it describes Jiva Goswami and Raghunandana Thakur taking Srinivasacharya and Narottam Das Thakur around all of the different Navadvipa Leelas of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and introducing them to whatever devotees were still there and showing them the different holy places like this. And I was thinking what a wonderful opportunity this would have been, Bhaktisiddhanta taking them around like that. So this was around the same time in 1913 that he established in Calcutta his printing press, which he dubbed the Brihat Mridanga. And of course the classic story we know, that he said the sound of the Mridanga can be heard for a few blocks. But the sound of the greater Mridanga, the printing press, can be heard unlimitedly. So this was his indication that by printing books, they can be distributed everywhere. And by that distribution of books, people will get more opportunity to hear about Krishna. Just like probably many of you in our chat room and listening in on our webcam, I know from previous conversations that many of you don't have temples near where you are, but yet you still come in contact with Krishna consciousness. So through a book or through the electronic book that we have here at Krishna.com, these opportunities of the broadened printing press, as Bhaktisiddhanta called it, the Brihat printing press. Now, at this time, he used the printing press. He published as I mentioned, a commentary on both the Chaitanya Charitamrita and a commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam. And at this time, he accepted his second two disciples, Vaishnava Das and Paramananda Vidyaratna Das. These were his second two disciples. So now he has three disciples at this point. So this is in 1913, June 22nd, 1914. This is a very difficult day for Bhaktisiddhanta, because this is the day that his father, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, departs from this world. You can just imagine, we all have a father. Most of us are attached to our father. Whether our father is a Vaishnava or whether our father wasn't a Vaishnava, most of us have some attachment. Now imagine your father is one of the topmost acharyas in the entire Sampradaya, and certainly the most vibrant preacher at that time in Vaishnava history. It was very difficult. You could just imagine the feelings of separation that were there. In addition to this, 1 year later, less than a year later, November 1914, actually a year and 3 or 4 months, in 1915, his spiritual master, Gaurkishore Das Babaji, departs from this world. This is November the 17th, 1915. So within a year, basically, the loss of his two most important and prominent spiritual leaders, spiritual guides, spiritual preceptors. That would be Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Gorkashore Das Babaji. So now, this, as I mentioned, Gorkashore Das Babaji departed from this world in November. This is at the end of Chaturmasya. And at this time, the Babajis, the imitation Babajis, who had been manipulating the different holy places and all, desired to acquire the body of Gorkashore Das Babaji. Gorkashore Das Babaji, in his mood of humility, had made some comment that when I die, they should tie a rope around me and drag my body through the streets. In this way, one can see what is one who is not a Vaishnava. So this is, of course, a deep mood of humility, but the bogus Babajis, they decided this is the proper thing to do. This was his request. So they quickly, some of the disciples sent for Bhaktisiddhanta, who appeared, long beard, unshaven, longer hair. He'd been doing Chaturmasya for the 4 months. And he immediately came in, and he instructed, he said, this is not the real mood. This was his mood of humility. This was not what he intended to be done. Besides that, I am the only disciple. Therefore, I should perform this. He said, no, you are not sannyasi. You cannot take charge of the body and perform the samadhi. So Bhaktisiddhanta had the police called. Or the police were called by them because it was quite a disturbance. So Bhaktisiddhanta addressed the constable. He said, I will allow any one of these men that has not had an illicit sexual connection with a woman in the last 1 year to come forward and touch the divine body of my spiritual preceptor, Gorkashore Das Babaji. Not one person stepped forward. He said, all right, any of you that have not had an inappropriate connection with a woman in the last 6 months, no one came forward. In the last 1 month, no one came forward. In the last 1 week, no one came forward. In the last 3 days, and at this point they all just kept their mouths shut and faded back into the background. So at this point, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and his disciples took charge of the body of Gorkashore Das Babaji and properly, with due respect, performed the samadhi ceremony for entombing his body. 16 years later, the course of the Ganga changed, and the samadhi was in fear of being flooded, and there was some concern who would be able to get the samadhi, and again the debate came up, oh, we want the samadhi that should be under our jurisdiction like this. Bhaktisiddhanta said those that are the true followers of Gorkashore Das Babaji will be able to make these arrangements, and sure enough, his own disciples were able to arrange for the samadhi to be loaded to a boat and transferred to the other side, and placed where it is now, next to the Yoga Pit area, the birth site of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, in this way, the life of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura changed dramatically from the daily inspiration and association and encouragement he was receiving in this way. So, feeling the separation after some time from these two great personalities, feeling the separation, he was beginning to think that, I have no support, I have no money, I have no people, and in a mood of humility he said, I have no intelligence. How can I go on? What should I do? So, he took rest that evening, and someone was mentioning here, I think it was Bhakti and Carol, was appreciating the dream earlier. Yes. Was appreciating the dream of Rohini Kumar Ghosh. So Bhaktisiddhanta had a dream, and in his dream, the entire Panchatattva, with all of their associates, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Jagannath Das Babaji, and Gorkashore Das Babaji all appeared before Bhaktisiddhanta and encouraged him, no, don't you be in anxiety like this. You continue, you go on and preach, and everything will be successful. There is nothing that can stop your forward progress in this way. So he became very, very much encouraged, and in this way he continued on with his preaching activities. We've come upon 9:20. I think this is the longest we've ever gone. I still have a number of subjects I haven't touched, and I think this is a very good point for us to stop because there's some questions coming up in the chat room. This is a good breaking point for the teachings of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, that despite feeling discouraged, despite feeling the separation from those who were his preceptors and spiritual guides, he was encouraged that you simply go on with your preaching, and by such preaching, without doubt, you'll be successful. And this should be an encouraging word to all of us. So we'll end there for this evening. This little bit of dip into the unlimited ocean of the pastimes of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, whose disappearance day we celebrated today. Hare Krishna. So we have one question in our chat room here from Amit. Any recorded interaction between Balaba and Gaudiya Vaishnavas of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? There's actually quite a bit of discussion. If you, I'm trying to think, Amit, where that is noted. Mostly you'll find that with Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Discussions about the similarities and differences between the Pushti Marg and the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. There are some minor differences, and they're there, but there are some recorded conversations or historical events relating to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And I'm unfortunately not able to give you the reference on where to find that information. But I'm sure if you do an internet search, you can find it. You can find anything on the internet these days, as we all know. Anyone else got anything else they'd like to throw out there? Bhakti Jeff, I appreciate your encouragement there. And Scott, so we've got a few devotees there. I hope you've had some opportunity to discuss different things. Those of you from the beginning of our chat room there, Bhaktin Carol, thank you very much. There was also another Bhaktin there that had some questions. Any of you in the chat room that would like to, if you don't have anything you'd like to ask now, but you come up with something, you're more than welcome to send it in to Krishna.com, and they have a question and answer section of Krishna.com where you can send in your questions and they'll be answered and dealt with like that. So I guess we'll finish there. And once again, we thank you for joining us for another evening in the lives of the Vaishnava Acharyas. Hare Krishna.